Happy Valentine's Day. I got you fragments of silicon.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. Indeed, it is Valentine's Day. Apologies in advance for any sound issues, mainly because Petty isn't with us, and so Galix is doing the background stuff. And I know we've had problems with that in the past. Hopefully, they've been ironed out.
And you still sound a little bit echoey, just throwing that out there. It might be our guest. I don't know if he has the stream playing or something.
Yeah, I'm like, how about now? That seems to be gone.
Yeah, that sounds a little better, yeah.
Like, live broadcasting. Anyway, joining us today is, forgive me if I mispronounce your name. I'm like, Vedran.
That's that. Well, you got the first one right, so that's okay.
Klanac. Like, it's always a dice roll. We come up upon international names.
Yeah, well, this one is Slavic, to be exact, Croatian one. So it
Right.
has a very distinctive pronouncement. So you're excused. All fine.
Okay, that's good. Like, anyway, Vedran here is the CEO of Ocean Media Games LLC. And right, so how we like to start things is to get to know the person behind the studio, behind the games and whatnot, and we'd like to do that by starting to ask, how did you get interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
So it's kind of like really intertwined thing because, I got involved in developing video games since Commodore 64 era in 80s. So and that's when I was a kid. So my long dreams since I was a kid probably is for many kids is like, oh, I want to make games one day, and then actually you don't realize that it's really a serious undertaking, no matter which background you have when you are involved with game production, like be it engineering or artistic or management side or whichever, or PR and marketing. So long story short, I graduated actually aerospace engineering. I'm an aerospace engineer, and I'm specialized in numerical physics. So thing is that I'm really good with the physics simulations and stuff like that. So and that's something what really landed me a first job in the industry, starting to work at Crow Team on a Serious Sam first-person shooter project. So that was actually my first job after university, and I was actually responsible there to develop 3D physics engine for Serious M2, and I managed to do that. So I did it. So that's something that was the first thing, and then I stayed with Crow Team for a couple of years, and I got a chance to work in Canada. And actually, then I moved my life from Croatia, Europe, to Canada, and I worked for Big Blue Bubble, which is a developer from London, Ontario. I've been there for a year. I worked there on Nintendo DS games, on PC games, and mostly on casual games. And that's something that practically traced the path for me and what I'm going to be doing next. Because after a year, I got back home to Croatia, and then actually I established Ocean Media. So that's in short. So this is from my involvement in video games, what I did first, and to the point where I established Ocean.
I'm like, yeah, that's not an unexpected career path that we've heard on this program. But, I suppose some questions that are involved in this particular track is, did you develop the Serious Sam 2 physics engines by yourself, or were there other people involved?
Of course, there are other people involved, but it was mostly me. The thing is that at that time, there was only the only person who was really much involved into the whole thing was a technical director who was overseeing the whole thing, Alen Ladovac. But I'm the one actually who developed the whole engine, and I'm the one actually who developed the core solving method, which later on that's something that's maybe less known. It's known really to the people who were involved at the time and who are really into physics simulations. So I'll give you this glimpse into this piece of history, which really happened in 2004-5. So what we did in Croteam, I have made the core solving method for physics engine, which enabled to simulate dozens and hundreds of objects in real time at interactive frame rates. At that time, you didn't have something like that. The only engines which were commercially available were Havok at that time, and something what guys were doing with Unreal Tournament. But so anyway, so what we did, we contributed this piece of code to open source, to Open Dynamics Engine. And from that point on, then it derived in a whole number of games. Box 2D, which is actually a very known 2D physics engine, was a derivative of all that and all this. So, and that all happened actually with this technology, which I created in Croteam, and then the CTO decided to contribute this to open source project. So that's something that's actually interesting and maybe lesser known to the wider public.
Mm. And branching off from that, has the physics simulation things played any part in your casual games career?
Yes and no. I'm still developing a couple of prototypes which are heavily inclining on physics. Like I don't remember actually that any of the casual games that we made in Ocean really was based crazily on physics. There was one, Zotrix, which actually used quite a lot of 2D physics, which is a 2D top-down space shooter game. But other than that, other games, no. So pretty much not. I'm actually working right now on a couple of prototypes, as I said, which are lean on the physics itself for the gameplay, and there's a reason for that. One thing is, casual games, they have a kind of like really different core gameplay mechanics, and working with the physics, you can probably use it as a tool, to get some effects and to get it running. But having developing a casual game completely to rely on core physics principles and all this, you're actually gonna rarely find that, because physics simulation is quite quirky, and actually what looks like a real physics on your screen, sometimes it's like there are a lot of workarounds and fakes for you to really see that something looks and acts believable. And I think that's the target goal of any physics simulation in video games. Not in for scientific purposes, it's quite the opposite. But for video games, it's like that you have a physics simulation that acts believable. but in reality, if you would let that physics run in the real world, you would actually see that it doesn't work that way. So so for casual games, no, not really, not that much.
Once again, yeah, it does depend on the casual game, because I could name a few that do rely on 2D physics, but yeah, it's definitely less of an issue. But continuing on, what was it about casual games that made you want to continue along this path, and strike out on your own?
Well, first of all, I was involved. My first involvement really with developing casual game was when I was part of Big Blue Bubble team in Canada,
Right.
and we worked there on really a number of those games. Where I realized that actually it's a lot of fun. That's one thing. The other thing is, when I was starting my company, I had to like really assess like a business case. It was like I was starting it alone. It was a startup. I didn't have any huge investment money, or I was not able to employ anyone, at least for the first 2 years of my company, and then the team grew. But for me, it was really a decision to figure out, okay, so I want to do games which I can make alone with the help of like 1 or 2 artists and musician within a couple of months, rather than going on something more sophisticated. Even hence the fact that I really had at that time really huge engineering knowledge, and I was able to code and make more complex games. But that's not the point, because the reality of the startup is you have to survive when you start putting out the games. So I decided to put out a couple of puzzle casual games, which actually they didn't sold well, but they helped me in something what was my goal at that time business wise, and that is to lend me a couple of contracts as a work for hire, which was actually then our business case for almost 10 years from that point on. So we really worked as a studio that was from 2007 until close to 2016. We worked as a studio who provided like a turnkey solution for development cross-platform of casual games, and at that time hidden object games were really kicking off. So and we were pretty good at that. We were pretty good at hammering out a hidden object game in like under 6 months. And those games were still selling then on Big Fish Games for like $20 a piece. So it was a good business case. That's one side of it. That's on a PC, but at the same time, we developed internally as a team our game engine to run on Nintendo DS, and that's something that really traced our trajectory on the consoles, which is actually even today our strongest side. So we were always working closely with Nintendo. And then on DS we developed, I think, almost 20 games from 2007 to 2010, I think 11, almost 30 games on DS, and then on Wii. We never worked on Wii U, and now on Switch. We are having really quite a good production. Yeah, that's that part. Actually, at that point, we started thinking more closely, how to branch our tech, because we develop all the games that we develop is on our internal game engine that we developed internally as a team, and it's a cross-platform engine. So on our it's like, for me, when I'm talking about it to other people, it's like it's Unity, but we build it ourselves, So it's that kind of thing. Like we develop in our engine and we deploy the game on iOS, Android, PC, Mac, Linux, PS4 and a Nintendo Switch. So and that's what we do right now. But since 2016 approximately, we are not working anymore as a work for hire studio, offering development services to other companies so much, but we are really just developing our own indie games and putting out that out. So in a recent couple of years, there's maybe less casual, but more like little shooter arcade games, but also even some casual titles that we are putting out as well.
Right. And in regards to your internal engine, I think this is the first time I've ever heard of a cross-platform solution for the Nintendo DS. I guess my question is, what was it like working on the Nintendo DS versus working on the Nintendo Switch?
Well, it's quite different from two reasons. First, Nintendo DS has two screens. All right. The other thing is it has like Nintendo Switch is literally you can practically put out there a PC game. So it's really powerful in terms of hardware. Nintendo DS was like very very scarce in terms of resources. Like you had 2 megabytes of RAM and 256 kilobytes for video RAM for graphics. So it's hard to compare. It's quite different. So you really had to optimize a lot, and not to mention that you're only able to use like 256 color images and stuff like that. So the pipeline. The working pipeline for Nintendo DS was actually branched. So what we did, was that with our engine we made it. That's something that now I'm gonna go a little bit really too technical on this because it's hard to avoid it. So Nintendo DS didn't have like one big pool of memory, it had like certain banks, like it had pools, like a lot of small pools of memory. It had like 64 kilobytes, 16 kilobytes, 128 kilobytes. So what we did, we made our own management system which bridged this gap, and then as a programmer, when you were working on it, you really worked like you have one big pool of memory. So that's something that actually made development closer, and that's what was our edge in really quickly developing those games. So and the engine was pretty much the same as on PC. So at the back end, the only low level how do you render music and graphics was just specialized, but on the level of API, it was pretty much the same.
Let's see. That's about what I expected, given stuff like natural power differentials and the two screens and all that jazz.
Yeah. Actually, the thing with the two screens, that was really something that we had a really good artists and designer guys who were very skillful, and actually we made a couple of ports, so to say, of a popular PC games to Nintendo DS, and what we really specialized in was converting a gameplay from a single screen on a PC to a device who has two screens, and we made a couple of games which were done really good. Those were titles from Playrix, like Fishdom, four elements and stuff like that. Those were really popular games back then, and just based on that, that really gave us some exposure, and we were pinged constantly on weekly basis from other publishers, like, oh, can you make this game for us? Can you make this game for us? So it really landed, new projects for us at the time. So that was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good to hear. And I suppose in terms of the modern development, how does like the Nintendo Switch having touchscreens affect things? Because you ported some hidden object games here recently, and They use the touchscreen functionality.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Nintendo Switch is, I would say, it's interesting concept because it's like it's really if you look at it from the aspect of a mobile console, mobile device that you really have in your bag or your pocket, if you have a big pocket, um, then it's like a mobile phone. It's like a tablet. Like you don't need Joy-Cons. It's like and if you develop a game who runs purely on a touch interface, that's what it is. So that's just one side of it. The other thing is, if you really dock it to a TV screen, then you should look at it like, oh, it's an Xbox or PS4. It's like, that's what it is. Like, then you have controller or two controllers as one, and that's how you play the game. The only thing is, it makes a difference, like how do you, as a developer, whether you support both modes or not, because by Nintendo we are not required to support both, but I'll tell you why we do. So there's like what we figured out. So this is me giving away some secrets of the trade here for other indie developers.
Right.
So here's a catch. What we found out from the feedback from the market, from other players, and from other analysis of other developers, majority of people on Nintendo Switch are playing games using touch interface. They fucking don't care for the Joy-Cons. That's fun. So if you want to have your game being played, then it's practically an imperative to make your game to work with a touch interface. All right. But now there's a catch on the marketing side. How are you going to do the video streaming on Twitch if your game supports only a touch interface? Only a touch interface.
Because you can't access the touch screen on the Switch.
Exactly.
I mean,
it's kind of like I saw reviews where the guy has, like he's a miner with that lamp or a speleologic lamp on his head and camera, and then playing Switch in his hands like you're seeing whole Switch, but you don't see, like the screen capture. It's ridiculous. It works, but it's ridiculous. So what you gotta do is, for streamers, you gotta make your game to work in a TV mode, because otherwise you can't get reviews.
Like,
so we are doing both, for the fun and gameplay reason for the players, and one for the actually promotion and marketing reason. So that's why we do that. So all our games have touch and TV mode.
It makes sense because the only way you can do tabletop mode is off screen, in terms of actually capturing footage.
Yeah.
It's not really an issue with us because we don't really have Switch capture capabilities right now. But we have a few of your games in the past. Like, and to that note, Galax, do you want to chime in because you're the one who reviewed those?
Sorry, I've been I had to do something else for some of this, but
yeah. Well, we're at Nintendo Switch games.
Yeah, I know, I got that. I mean, I always find using the touchscreen on the Switch a little bit awkward because of how I usually choose to play it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's more, it's more, do you want to get your grievance with Skee-Ball?
Well, I will ask if they ever thought about putting in a mode where you could just get up on the machine and like dump the balls in, because I've always wanted to do that with Skee. So I've always had a thing about Skee-Ball, and it's mostly that I always have the urge to cheat at it. But I know that that's not actually possible. I guess the only actual question I had is like, where did you come up with the ideas for all the alternate boards and stuff?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I'll tell you. we locked ourselves into a room for weeks and we designed. So it was like, well, it was a result of our internal design process. Like here's the thing. First, I have to clarify something about the skee ball, and I think a lot of people actually really don't know that. So a skee ball is actually a game under the patent. All right. So because the fact that it's so widespread in US, and I'm saying in US because believe me, outside of US and maybe a little bit of Canada, the freaking other rest of the world has no idea what a skee ball is.
I guess I imagine the lack of Chuck E. Cheese's and
Boardwalk.
Yeah.
No, it's something else. It's a lack of entertainment parks like you have in US. We don't have that in Europe. Like we started getting that like in 90s. You have that since beginning on 20th century in US. You have like the Coney Island. You have like all kind of. We never had that. Like you can Google probably when was the first roller coaster made in Europe. You would be surprised. So it's like we didn't have entertainment parks like that. We had something else, some other games that probably you have no idea about. So that's the thing, but that's just trivia because you feel that on the sales of the game. Like US, it's like skyrocket. The rest of the world, like 5 copies. It's people really don't know about skee ball. So skee ball is actually a game under the patent and it's owned. So we actually have the exclusive license to make the skee ball game. And our game on other platforms too, on mobile, on iOS, Android, where actually is quite successful title as a free-to-play game, is the only officially licensed game. All the other games are actually they have a problem with the copyright. And we are, and the license owner, I know that they're taking tremendous effort, on weekly and monthly basis actually to take those games from the stores, because all these games are just, like knockoffs.
Interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know that, and that's one of the reasons why the skee ball costs $20 on Switch, and not
just
like
for
$5.
Fees and stuff.
Well, not you combine everything, and your business case is like we cannot go below $20, and it's a premium game. It's actually a premium brand per se. And if you look at right now, skee ball is owned by Baytech Games. Actually, they're a big company from Wisconsin, and they're specialized in all these other arcade style of games and what you would find in arcade park and games like that. Skee ball is one of them. So we actually acquired a worldwide exclusive license for skee ball, and that's when we made the game. So and then we made a mobile version. And we made also a Nintendo Switch, because Nintendo Switch was a very logical thing, because it has like motion controller on Joy-Cons, and that's what we did. So did you have a chance to play skee ball on Switch using the motion controls?
I think I did a little bit, but I think I actually had better success with the buttons, but that's just because I'm a better button gamer and I'm not actually great at skee ball in real life either. So
yeah, all right. So fair enough. So that was also an interesting experience, actually. So do you see? So here's a question back to you. Do you see a lot of games on Switch using motion controls compared to maybe what you expected to see?
A lot of them don't do much with the motion controls, but it's a lot of the ones like that make sense to have motion controls do. You know what I mean? Like a lot of.
But do they have?
In that kind of genre, I usually have some, but platformers and puzzle games and stuff usually don't.
Yeah, well, my point is most of the games actually on Switch don't have and don't use motion controls, which you would expect compared, for example, to Wii, if you remember.
Yeah.
When when we came out, the motion control was the thing, and that's what it actually skyrocketed the console and everything. But I'll give you some developer background and insight into this. Actually, Nintendo doesn't want us developers to use motion controls.
Because it's a gimmick from their previous thing, or
they have such strict guidelines that practically you're practically unable to do that. And there are some reason behind that, but
I guess they definitely don't want bad motion controls, which is definitely easy.
Well, yeah, but yeah. And the thing is, like, you can't violently shake the controller. There are all kind of gameplays actually who would really be cool with that. You're not allowed to do that, and all kind of stuff. Like, for example, when we were doing this, so for example, when we were implementing it on Switch, it was introduced in the game actually through a patch a couple of months later than game even released. Because when you go into this whole procedure, first you have to write an elaborate of couple of pages, up to 10 pages, describing how do you imagine that this works. Then you have to explain, how are you not violating the guidelines that they set, and because you do, at least in some point, you're close to do that, and then they have to approve that. So that approval is like a month plus time, and then you have to develop it, and then you have to send it back to them for verification and certification, and then they say, oh, it's good or it's not good. So it takes months to even get it in.
I didn't realize it was that complicated.
Yeah, it is. You wouldn't believe how much we were trashed on some reviews for doing this and that on the motion controls, and I was like, oh man, I would scream out to the people who freaking don't understand that it's not us. We just can't do that. You're not allowed to do that, and it's not spoken so much about it. So there's a bit of not a bit, but there's a lot of frustration on developers' end when it comes to that. We are seeing some things where Nintendo is launching that is using motion controls like their robotic kind of thing with those carbo boards installments and stuff like that. So it's like they like on technical side, the gyro and everything is like so precise on Switch. It's fantastic for so many different applications, but it has a huge restriction like what you're allowed to use, and that's a pity, because honestly I think Switch would be like so much better commercialized, and the software on it, but yeah, it is what it is.
Like, honestly, it doesn't surprise me that much that Nintendo would be stringent. Like, not the first time I've ever heard of that from the big N.
Yeah, no, it's not surprising. It's just, kind of interesting, because
I suppose
it's a pretty significant limitation. But I guess they're probably going at least partially for quality control of input stuff that they can do in-house with their own stuff, and then also trying to avoid damaging stuff.
Right.
After the Wii controller through the TV issues.
Well, I mean, they solved that with straps.
Yeah, no, I know. Joy-Cons don't have straps.
I know.
They do have straps.
Right.
They don't have straps built in.
Yeah, there's an attachment to the Joy-Con when you detach it, which you get with Switch, and you can attach it, and then you have straps.
So it's not like always there, like the ones on.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, absolutely, that's correct. So it's not straightforward.
Anyway, I suppose getting into the supposition of that, if you were unconstrained, what would you use those verboten motion features for? Like, do you have something in mind, or?
Well, it would be a great tool for all kind of like 2D or even 3D physics-based games for all kind of controlling, kind of things in 3D. So there's a lot of fun. It could be very interestingly used for all kind of sports games and stuff like that. So yeah, there are a lot of really applications. Like everything what you saw on Wii, and beyond that, because it's better graphics, better GPU, better CPU than Wii, and all kind of others. There's a more precision in the sensors on Joy-Cons when it comes to the motion controls. So really a lot of opportunity for example for games in a TV mode where you really need like maybe per pixel precision and kind of things. So very very cool gameplay could be developed and designed around those features if those would be allowed and under not under such strict guidelines and restrictions.
Well, I suppose put another way, is there any way you could do that on like mobile devices and their motion controls?
No, from one obvious reason. If you ever developed anything on a motion controls on a mobile, one thing is the jitter is just too much present there, and they're just jerky to work with. They're not so precise. I would say from year to year, yeah, it's gonna be more sophisticated and all this. So, but the mobile has the same problem that we just brushed on a minute ago. You would need to have a strap for your mobile device. Otherwise, you could just throw away and break a TV and your $1,000 device. So there's. It's kind of tough. Like, I don't know.
Right. I see what you're saying. Well, I mean, I guess the only hope is Nintendo gets less restrictive with the motion, but how likely that is kind of up to them. Anyway, I suppose that gets us to the present and your latest projects. Where Angels Cry, Tears of the Fallen, Collector's Edition, and The Man with the Ivory Cane.
Yeah, those are the two latest releases, and this is something that brings us to something the new dimension of Ocean as a company, where actually we are acting as a publisher, but somebody else was a developer. So this is something what we do right now is that we act as a indie publisher and helping other developers who have their PC games to bring them to Switch, because reality is that for certain types of games, mostly adventure and casual games, you have audience who is on PC, but there's also audience who is on Switch and is not on PC and it's not on mobile. So we found that niche there, and so far it's really working very well for us. So the thing is, what we do, we offer other developers a turnkey publishing solution where we actually do even the porting of their technology, their game engine or anything, and we put out the game. So in a nutshell, it looks like this. You're a developer who developed a game and you have your source code of the project and all this, but you don't know nothing how Switch works, how to put it there and all this. So what we do is, like, you give us your source code, everything, we sign a deal, and we really try to work on a fair deal, which is, I cannot say now what exactly, but let's say that we are like close to 50-50. On the sales, on the royalties, and we do the all work on engineering side, on publishing, on marketing, and everything. and you collect your royalties from the first copy sold. So that's what we do. So and we have now signed like a number of these titles. So for this year we have a lineup of 11 releases so far, but there's going to be at least 3 or 4 more, which we are now in negotiation with some developers. So that's what we do throughout. We started this in 2019 and completely moving forward with that in 2020. Besides, also we have 3 of our own titles in development, our original games. So that's all what we are doing in a current state presently.
Okay. Well, once again, Alex, is there anything you want to chime in about, say, Where Angels Cry, considering you just reviewed it this week?
I guess. Well, the non-touchscreen method of control, I was somewhat curious as to why you chose to use the stick and trigger pretty much exclusively rather than. I had a hard time trying to actually get the game booted up because I couldn't figure out what button to make stuff do on the open screen for a minute.
Well, yeah, that is one of the things that we actually we didn't do any tutorial around that thing, but we said, like, you know what, people are gonna figure that out, but that's not how it goes. I'm completely aware of that. I'll tell you why we did that particular buttons. Because there is for the item picking and dropping, is you can do things simultaneously, and if you want to use stick, when you hold your Joy-Con controller, if you want to use stick with your thumb, you can only either use stick or the buttons on the top. All right, A, B, X, X, and Y. But you already have your, like your trigger finger, you already have it on the fire button. So that was the most intuitive scheme that we figure out throughout the testing, that you can do most of the stuff in the game that it really doesn't bother you. Like every time you would have to press a button, you would have to move it from the stick. So you would have to put the virtual cursor on top of something, press a button, and then something like this. But there are also moments where you can collect item, drag it, and drop it. And you can't do that if you have this on other thing. The only thing what we were able then to use to satisfy this condition was actually to either use the shoulder button or the fire button. So it was most intuitively to use the fire button, because it's already, your finger is on it when you hold the Joy-Con. I don't think that a lot of people is holding Joy-Con the way that you hold it in your hand, and then you have your trigger finger, like on shoulder button. I don't think so.
I guess that makes sense. And it's designed, I guess, probably to be played using only one Joy-Con, but why only the right one? Because the left Joy-Con doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't. The only reason why I see that it could work is for the left-handed people. So that there is no other use of any buttons, because it's literally a point-and-click adventure. Mm-hmm. So everything you do is you really need one click and pointing. So it's kind of like either left or right. So we went with the right. There is a point, and I agree with that we could probably go and do this with the left one. But now when we are talking about this, I'm not sure how we would justify that to Nintendo. We'd have to probably say why is that so, because I don't know. To be clear, we just go in by default on the right one, and mostly because I think all the guys who are working on this are right-handed, so it ended up that way. Mm-hmm. Which is not politically correct. I agree.
I guess you could mention it's for left-handed people.
Sorry.
I mean, I guess you could mention it. This switching would be for left-handed people. Like,
Yeah, yeah, probably, and yeah.
Or at least
So
making both possible.
uh, that can bring you in a unfavorable position, or maybe you can break a game. For us that's an unshored waters, because if you manage to break a game by a weird combination of clicking and that kind of thing, then that probably wouldn't pass certification with Nintendo. We didn't test it, so it would either probably the best thing is like if you start using one controller, the other one, like the inputs are not being registered, and vice versa. So which is also another pond of potential untested area. So it's not that simple. You gotta work out all the potential areas where you might have an issue, because that's something that you're going through when you're going through certification. And besides the fact that Nintendo is testing, that the whole game is working, they're also testing the game in all the possible ways how game is not supposed to work.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of tricky. So sometimes, there are compromises in development, like, oh, we're going to do this because the certification process is going to go quicker and we're going to be done and go out with the game. So I'll tell you one thing, that we are aware of this because we got a couple of feedback based on that as well, and there's a possibility that we release a patch for all these adventure games that we do this that allow left and right. But the reality is you need one stick and one button. So
Right.
I explained just minutes ago why this made sense for us. And I think once you go into the game and really, get with the controls, then you probably even don't think about it
Yeah,
anymore.
it's not too bad once you've been playing for a bit. It
Yeah.
just took me a minute to get used to, and again, I had a hard time figuring out what to do when I'm booted up, because I'm a very video games controller-based person. Like, I started playing on NES and stuff, and I never did much with computers, so I always default to having like left thumb move, right thumb enter stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. We did that in one game that didn't really go well in reviews.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's different for like hidden object drag and drop stuff.
right. Anyway, so as enlightening as this conversation has been, we are running low on time, so just a couple more questions. In regards to what's upcoming, you have said that there are anywhere from 11 to 14, 15 games coming up. Is there any of those that you can talk about at this point?
Maybe a little bit about Zotrix Fusion.
Uh-huh.
That I think that's gonna be an interesting one. So we are making a shooter game, space shooter game. People who are familiar with our Zotrix PC shooter game will be more familiar with the universe and all this. So we're doing that, but it's a game where we have like mix of 2D top-down shooting levels, which are compared to original Zotrix, much bigger levels. Original Zotrix was all focused on a single screen, and here we have like a moving camera, and you have like a bigger level. And we also have full 3D shooting levels, like you're playing Star Wars. Like dogfights and stuff like that. So I think it's gonna be pretty interesting. The other thing is that on a 3D part, all the ships and enemy ships and structures they're done as 3D voxels. So it's kind of like Minecraft meets Star Wars kind of gameplay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Unconventional. And is Zotrix Fusion being developed for the PC, the Nintendo Switch, multiple platforms?
Well, we're developing it in our tech, so internally, yeah, we're gonna have it for all these platforms, including mobile. What we are gonna go out with as an end product, it will really depend on if we nail the controls. I would say PC and Switch for sure. Maybe new Xbox, and I know what's going to happen with whichever PS5 or something. But Switch and PC for sure. We would like to do it on mobile, but they're all kind of like, if you don't have kind of like a pro controller like on Switch or Joy-Cons, because it's like a twin stick shooter, and to nail down controls on that, we try to, for example, that's where we experimented with motion controls for in 3D for controlling your camera and stuff like that. But even for 2D space shooter game, it's kind of hard to nail down the touch controls and to make it we can make it that it works, but it's not fun. So it has to be fun.
Sounds like it's still in like prototyping phase.
For the mobile part, yeah. For the Switch, we nailed it, so we know exactly how that's gonna work.
Okay. And how close to release is the Nintendo Switch version?
We are talking about Christmas time this year.
Okay. And well, I suppose on that note, we'll end it here, and hopefully we'll have you back on the program to talk about Zotrix Fusion in greater detail, close to the time of release.
Yeah, of course. I'll be glad, definitely, to join you again and to share everything that we have to share.
No problem. Anyway, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Be sure to join us on Sunday for our typical review session. And until then, I shall wish you good gaming.